Welcome back to Son of Chelsea. Daniel Childs here. Hope you're doing really well on this Easter Monday. As I explained on my X, and as you can probably still hear from my voice, I've been annoyingly suffering with illness. I basically came down with a bit of a cold literally after the Legia Warsaw game. So I had to postpone reviewing that game and previewing the Fulham game. And even yesterday, I just wanted to give it another day. So hopefully those listening, those watching can deal with my voice slightly a little bit different and maybe not as strong, but I've obviously got a lot to say. And I have to say, the combination of WrestleMania weekend, my guy CM Punk, and Chelsea somehow miraculously recovering from 1-0 down at Fulham yesterday has made me feel slightly better. So we've got quite a bit to delve into on today's show because obviously a lot has happened with those two games that I haven't covered. But of course, mainly talking about the Fulham game. The Fulham game that for 80, 81, 82 minutes looked like it was going to be the end of Chelsea's season. I think for many it felt like the final nail in the coffin of Enzo Maresca, and Chelsea's chances of Champions League qualification were going to be put to bed. And the reaction post that game, thinking if that game hadn't turned around, was pretty bleak. And I think rightly so. The performance did not indicate that Chelsea had responded positively, had kind of understood the stakes of this game, because really this was win or bust. And kind of every game now between from where we sit right now after that Fulham game and towards the end of the Premier League season is kind of going to be that scenario for Chelsea. We knew that when we failed to beat Ipswich. We knew that when we failed to beat Brentford. I think we kind of even knew that before then because the teams around us are picking up points. Chelsea, their form, their confidence, their performance levels just simply haven't been good enough for a number of months. So we knew Chelsea were not going to be flawless in this run-in. The turnaround is incredible. I think to see the emotion and the passion of the players at full time, the reactions there, whatever we can say about the overall performance levels and the concerns that still persist, I think the emotion of those players at full time with that away end, I think tells me that at least within the players, within the squad, they deeply care about the stakes of this season. I think they deeply care about these wins and losses, and to them it means a lot. And I think that is a good sign, because to show that visibly to supporters who have been questioning, like myself, throughout the entirety of this season, specifically since Christmas when form has derailed and we've heard Maresca speaking in press conferences and internally the reports that have come out, do the club actually care as deeply as we do about this season? They care a lot about what's happening maybe in 5 years' time, but actually getting Champions League football, is that even a serious thing? Is it something that is going to bring serious ramifications to the people in charge if we fail to get it? And more I felt that just isn't the case internally. There is a shrug and move on mentality when Chelsea fail. And at times, of course, in a lot of ways, the players have represented that with their poor performances. But I think the way they responded in that closing minutes and the celebrations at full time and a connection with supporters was huge. This game in total, you can look at it, you can try and dissect it. It kind of falls in the category of many of Chelsea's good days, rare good days since the turn of the year. Chelsea have not had a resounding great performance that we can really dissect for a long period of time. This was very much in line with what I have seen from Chelsea when they have been able to get the job done. It's a flurry of individual moments. It's a turnaround in momentum. It is a kind of looking at it more psychologically as kind of a mental boost for the players and seeing if that can carry you forward. Performance-wise, not really. There was a lot about this performance. The majority of this performance was very in keeping with what we've seen under Maresca and his style of football for a long period of time now. That's the concerning part, is that I think from a structural kind of tactical point of view, from a philosophy point of view, from a profile point of view, I still have deep concerns about Chelsea's ability to get over the line. The one thing you're hoping is that a moment like that clicks everything into gear in the players and the momentum, as we can see at this time of the season, as we saw last season after that very dramatic late win against Man United. There were shades of that yesterday, right, where we didn't expect that to happen. Is there going to be a revival, and can that actually spark something within the group to turn this season around and actually end it on a positive note? That's the conflicting things at the moment. There is no kind of way of trying to divert this and trying to spin this. a huge positive boost when Chelsea most desperately needed it. It's something that the club simply hasn't had for a number of months. Even when Chelsea have won games, they've been games you expected them to win. There hasn't been a lot of drama at times. They've kind of bored people. So the fact that this was a dramatic, chaotic, really emotional ending to a game on Easter weekend, the weekend of unexpected revivals and unexpected comebacks, Chelsea provide one. Whether that is the comeback to their season and their hopes of Champions League football, I'm not entirely sure. I didn't have many complaints about the starting lineup yesterday, because it was kind of the strongest one that Enzo Maresca could put out. When you look at his lineups in recent weeks, they have begun to look a lot more baffling, with the Legia Warsaw game, with the Brentford game in particular. These are things that have very much sparked questions and concerns. The game, as I say, played out kind of unfortunately how I expected it to for a large period. Fulham looked tactically more secure. They looked more united. They seemed physically to overwhelm Chelsea. It felt very much like we just continued that game on Boxing Day, where Fulham are overrunning Chelsea. They're getting the better of Chelsea. Chelsea don't really have a response. It's not that Chelsea did absolutely nothing before Tyreek George's right boot changed the course of this game. It's that I just think that the levels of performance simply weren't good enough. And it looked like on TV, I wasn't there at the game, but I think that the away crowd kind of reflected this at half time. It just wasn't anywhere close to what you'd expect, and especially for a game, as I say, that is a must-win. Alex Iwobi capitalising on a really poor error in the centre of the park by Reece James. There was sort of defensive chaos even before then, and it felt like Fulham knew that Chelsea were there to be got at, knew that Chelsea weren't at their best, and very much capitalised on it. The attacking lack of end product that we have seen from Nicholas Jackson, a really bad day for him yesterday. Cole Palmer, Pedro, Neto, Noni Madueke, who started the game, that really continued. The closest Chelsea got was actually Neto in the second half, where he had his shot saved by Bernd Leno. But really, I have to say, that game was drifting. That was drifting to a very dismal end. And I think that Enzo Maresca obviously was getting a lot of abuse at halftime. I think a lot of people had kind of given up on the season, have kind of seen what has happened in the past few weeks of Chelsea getting increasingly worse. And yeah, it felt like nothing was going to change. Now, Enzo Maresca deserves credit because he did physically bring Tyreek George on. But I have to say, and you may think this is harsh, but I don't think it is based on what I've seen from Maresca's team this season. I've consistently talked about the best moments of this Chelsea team always seem to be the complete opposite of what Maresca's football is advertised to be. Chelsea at their best always seem to look like a team that works so much better when they are a bit more free-flowing, when they are a bit more chaotic, when they are a bit more direct and a bit more off the cuff. Individual brilliant moments that we've seen from Marco Correa in recent weeks have obviously helped Chelsea get over the line. This was the right boot from Tyreek George. It could be seen as one of the most important boots and important swings of a football in the Clearlake era so far if Chelsea end up getting Champions League football, because individually such a huge moment, and the irony of course of a Cobham talent bailing Blueco out, I think it's very hard to kind of not revel in that, not kind of see the significance in that. And this is a guy who I think many of us would have liked to have seen gain a lot more football. The interesting, I think, tweak and the quirk of George in recent weeks is he's actually played much more as a centre forward, kind of as at least more central in Chelsea's attack than the left wing kind of area I think most of us anticipated he would play. But you talk about taking your opportunity, you talk about making a statement, you talk about turning the tide of the season and proving that you're a player that has to be gaining more minutes. I really do hope that that moment isn't just a significant one in the young career of Tyreek George. I hope it's one that Maresca turns around and realises to have players like that in the team at this point in the season is essential. He needs to be playing more football because there's a wave of momentum now with George. He scored a couple of goals. He looks like an influential player, and using that raw, erratic energy, I think, is something that this team desperately needs to spark it back into life. So, I mean, the finish itself was exquisite. It was a nice little knockdown, a nice little combo from Cole Palmer, but really, the way he turned, just talent, right? That's what it was, raw talent. You could just see the ball striking ability that many people have been excited by from Tyreek George through the academy, and then getting into the first team where we've seen more and more from him in recent months. So I think obviously huge, and great that Tyreek George, no messing about, he just runs straight back to the touchline. This is his first Premier League goal. He could have celebrated, but no, he's running straight back to the touchline, the centre circle, and getting back for Chelsea to restart the game. And the wave of momentum, we see it so often in games. In some ways, it was a reverse of what we saw at Boxing Day. I'm not entirely, because I have to say Fulham had turned the tide in that game a long way before they actually scored and won the game. But in some poetic irony, Chelsea were able to do what they did to Chelsea on Boxing Day and really turn the tide of this game. And again, just the wave of momentum. I thought, the impetus from those players, the speed of passing. Tactically, again, people talk about how Fulham were suddenly pressing Chelsea up. Like, yeah, sure, that's beneficial, but I will come back to this, that I just don't think it's a great sign of Chelsea's long-term ambition that for nearly half a season, your tactics can be completely nullified if a team just decides to sit back, which many have of varying levels of quality, whether they're the fifth in Poland, whether they're Arsenal away, whether they're Fulham, whether they're Leicester who are getting relegated to the Championship. That is still an ongoing conversation. Now, some people have rebutted the players basically just doing it off the cuff and turning around and very much winning this game on their own, because the actual goal, the Pedro Neto winner, which is again another outstanding finish from a player inside the box when Chelsea so desperately needed some inspiration, is I think the second longest passing sequence that Chelsea have put together. There was a brilliant, I think, Trev pass within there as well. Just the orchestration from going from defence to attack in a quick manner, and then having a position when you actually, if you do a freeze frame when that ball comes into the box, there's at least, I think, 4 Chelsea attackers in there. I love to see that at that point in the game. I love that Chelsea look to overwhelm the opposition. It's of great frustration to me whenever I see Chelsea looking to get a winner and there's like one player in there. No, it was great that the players kind of, at least either through Maresca wanting them to get up there or just their own impetus, was just making sure you're overwhelming Fulham, going there, trying to get the margin. And obviously the ball falls to Pedro Neto. He swivels, he turns, and absolutely rockets that ball into the top corner. No chance for Leno, and sparks scenes of just wild celebrations. And just disbelief, I have to say, watching it, just disbelief of what had happened in that game. Like, I don't think anyone can seriously say they saw that coming. No one can say they saw that coming, based on the game, based on the way it played out, based on just watching Chelsea for an extended period of time. Since, as I say, if you'd watched them at the early part of the season, maybe you could think about Chelsea doing something like this. But since mid-December, this team has been lacking life, lacking unpredictability in a good way, lacking chaos, lacking an ability to overwhelm the opposition and really feel like even if something's going against them, to rise against adversity. This was a huge moment for these players to rise up and keep Chelsea's season alive, because that's what this game was. I don't think you can underrate the significance of that win, that period when George scores and then Neto scores and Chelsea are able to get over the line. You could see it at full time. The moment Anthony Taylor blows that whistle, who actually didn't turn out to be a key part of the game at all, and the celebrations with that away end, who were incredible yesterday, really were, and everyone who was there, even watching on TV, it was clear that away end were fighting for Chelsea, and the players ended up fighting for them as well, which is, again, emotional. That connection that people want to have with their football teams is something that sadly has been so greatly lacking between this Chelsea and their supporters for a long period of time. So hopefully moments like that will continue to build that at a key point of the season. That's all I'm really taking from this game. It's about momentum. Because to expect Enzo Maresca as a coach to rip up his whole kind of platform, I'm not entirely sure we're going to get that. I think what Chelsea kind of have to hope is that moments like this spark something in individuals to kind of get a sense of, again, a sense of positivity, a sense of inspiration, that Chelsea can overwhelm some of their limitations. That's kind of my hope. The one negative, unfortunately, again, it's about Enzo Maresca, and people may think this is harsh. He walks down the tunnel, and in some ways, there's two ways of looking at this, right? He walks down the tunnel at full time. Now, he was berated at half-time because at Craven Cottage, you have to walk basically across the pitch to get to the dressing room. It's kind of a unique ground in that sense. Usually when you're in the touchline, like you have at Stamford Bridge, at many grounds, they just, turn out of the dugout and go straight back to the dressing room. You actually have to do this long walk across the pitch. And there was time for Chelsea fans to see Enzo Maresca at half-time. The season is ebbing away. This is another dismal performance away from home in a game of significance. And they let him know. And maybe if you're more pro Enzo Maresca, you can kind of understand why at full time he doesn't want to address those people. I criticised Mauricio Pochettino for this last year, and I will criticise any Chelsea head coach, especially when there's been a dearth of these kind of moments. I think it's a massive missed opportunity for him not to go up there and actually make something of it. I actually think the wave of positivity, the fact that people were so amped up, so happy, couldn't believe their eyes, I think that could have been a real opportunity for him to build some connection, right? You're still the Chelsea head coach. Can you try and grow that connection? The fact that he just walks down the tunnel, I don't know. It just, for me, just more for him, I think it's a wasted opportunity. And I think more people, even up post-game, are going to be looking at it as kind of a Sarri situation. I saw the parallels between this and Cardiff 2019 away, when Chelsea turned that round unexpectedly and kind of was a saving moment for the season. But I think many people had already made their minds up on Sarri, that connection just was never going to be forged. And in the end, he left. I think what Maresca said post-game, I mean, I sometimes think, is it just better Maresca just doesn't do press conferences? Because I don't think he helps himself. I don't think he's a great reader of moments, whether it's failing to beat Ipswich at home and then not taking full accountability, or in this case, seemingly just downplaying how big that win was. I find it weird for a guy who's been clearly under a lot of pressure and scrutiny and criticism, that I'm not asking him to kind of fire back at people, but you'd think you'd revel in that moment a bit. Like, the fact that he kind of post-game goes, well, yeah, it's a nice moment, but listen, this has already been a great season for us. I mean, most people just kind of laugh at it. It's like, well, no, like that's why that moment was so big, because this hasn't been a great season for us. Fans have not been able to experience moments like that. And you should be dialing up how important that moment is. It's just, again, I think Maresca at times is his worst enemy, and he gives way too much ammunition to this belief that he is disconnected, that he's kind of this bland technocrat who doesn't really engage with the emotional side. That I think is really important if you're a Chelsea head coach. So I think that's the one disappointment, that you've just won a game, you've won a big game. This is your first away win. I don't know if I mentioned that already. First away win since December. Against anyone of any quality, really, as well. Like, this is not just like 18th place in the Premier League. This is a team who've had a pretty decent season, who gave Chelsea a difficult game, and still he's kind of, it's another shrug of the shoulders. I find it a bit bizarre, really, because I think at that moment you really want to be injecting and very much capitalizing on all that energy if you can. In any way, I think that's just a natural psychological thing to do, to rally people behind you. And it just, again, it feels like that disconnect between the decision makers, the head coach, and the fans in terms of what actually matters. And I think that is something that will let Enzo Maresca down in the end. I still kind of firmly believe that, because I think he's kind of made his bed for a lot of people, and I kind of respect that, because some of his comments in the past few weeks have been so condescending, trying to paint the fans as kind of the villains at Stamford Bridge. I always think it's a losing game for a head coach. But then you get a positive moment, and you're still kind of just a little bit just a little bit casual about it. I find it a little bit just bizarre from his own point that he isn't trying to big up the moment, because his own players tell a very different story. Watch the reactions of those players at full time. You can kind of mock it. I'm not going to mock it because I think it's brilliant. But those players looked like they just won a trophy. And I'm not saying beating Fulham away is a trophy. But it just, I think that, again, the contrast between the players' responses and what they've actually said in press conferences. They want Champions League football. They crave Champions League football, compared to what their head coach says. I think it's easy for people to then look at a disconnect. And then to make a connection in a game where they're playing one style of football that very much has been a style of football of the head coach, and then it seems like we do something out of the ordinary, doesn't feel like it's very much in keeping with what Maresca wants to do. That's why people feel it's the antidote of what Maresca wants to do, because the way he set this team up for a long period of time now doesn't feel constructed to have those unpredictable moments. And again, I think the contrast in reactions post full time, because he massively celebrated when the team won. So again, I just find it bizarre. And I think that, it's a missed opportunity. And will he get another moment like that is kind of the big question, because Chelsea could very well disappoint again in another week's time. And at the very least, you've missed at least one opportunity to forge a connection with an away end who were very celebratory. But he kind of said it's for the players. But I don't know. That and the combination of what he said post full time, kind of again thinking it's already a good season. Because basically what you're saying is, well, it doesn't really matter what happens for the rest of the season. I already think it's been a good season. And I'm sorry, I think the players and I think everyone watching Chelsea goes, no, it isn't. Like, if we don't get Champions League football, this still isn't a good season. Because then the psychology that comes from that is, well, why play the rest of the games? Why care about the rest of the games if you think it's been a good season already? You're kind of just, to you it's a bonus getting Champions League football, when I think to us, for a lot of us, it's no, this is the essential thing, getting Champions League football. The reality is Chelsea are back in the hunt for it, because Forest has obviously dropped a lot of points. They play Spurs away tonight. Whether Spurs, I mean, they're just off the back of beating Frankfurt, whether they have something about them, and whether Forest are kind of flagging a little bit when things get very serious. The fifth place always gives Chelsea a wider margin for error. Everton, Liverpool, Newcastle, Man United and Nottingham Forest are the run-in for Chelsea now in terms of the Premier League. I think people have kind of pointed out that maybe 3 out of 5 gets the job done. You've also got to factor in that Chelsea directly face 2 teams that are in the race with them, which in some ways is a real positive, because you get to directly take points off your rivals, which I think is huge. I don't know what to expect from here, to be honest. I think many of you probably feel the same. It's a great moment of jubilation, and I'm so happy for Tyreek George. I'm happy for Neto, because this is a guy who's gained a lot of criticism, but he steps up in a big moment. That's a memorable goal for him in his Chelsea career, because he hasn't had many of them. But it's kind of hard to know what to anticipate when we reach that Everton game in a week's time, whether Chelsea fall back into what they've been doing a lot under Enzo Maresca, or whether this really is a turning point. We won't be able to gauge that till Saturday lunchtime. But at the very least, we don't have to continually be negative for another week about performances, because obviously it's a huge 3 points, and to see the emotion at full time was great on an Easter weekend. So thank you so much. Apologies about my voice. Hopefully I'll be back in fit and kind of firing shape by the time we get to the weekend and close out the season. I hope you have a great Easter. I hope you've had a great Easter weekend. If you are a wrestling fan like me, hopefully you've enjoyed a bit of WrestleMania. And follow me across the socials, rate and review the podcast if you enjoy it, and I will see you again very soon. All the best.